Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Today is a very special session and I am doing this on behalf of American Indo-Pacific Forum. American Indo-Pacific Forum is a group focused on strengthening American Indo-Pacific relationships and fabric in the background of quadrilateral security dialogue and cooperative strategies in multiple spheres such as security, free and open Indo-policy, policy management, etc. The American Indo-Pacific Forum has evolved from the US-India Security Council and Forum that was instrumental in landmark cooperative projects between the United States and India. We are spread across the United States and have chapters in various states. As a group, we look forward to present the quickly evolving Indo-Pacific theater and challenges, solutions, preparedness of the American Indo-Pacific Alliance in the region. So today's panelists are four, and I'm going to introduce them. First, let's welcome all of them, and then I'll start introducing one by one. Namaskar, gentlemen, and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Namaste, namaste, namaste.
Namaskar.
In no particular order, I'm going to start with Ramesh Kapur ji. All of you are important. It's just that my list goes easy if I go with that list. So Ramesh Kapur ji is President US-India Security Council. The council, usiscouncil.org, is a bipartisan organization to encourage closer ties between US and India and to promote the idea that US's future security would be greatly enhanced by working closely with India. Welcome, Ramesh ji.
Thank you.
And next, here is a face that you know very well. He has been gracing many television screens and programs, Ambassador Pradeep Kapur. Ambassador Pradeep Kapur is acknowledged as a luminary diplomat with a distinguished career, working closely with Indian Prime Ministers, including 𝙒𝙗�au𝙗, Narasimha Rao, 𝑖𝘓 other heads of governments, heads of state, and global leaders and policymakers in different continents of the world, Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, and South America. Our next guest is Satish Jha. He is an inventor and philanthropist, although he would like to be remembered for his work as a journalist. When he was in his early days, he was a journalist. He was associated with Indian Express and Times of India. Correct me if I'm wrong, Satish ji. So we are going to get the real journalist opinion. He and I will be on the same wavelength, I guess. So is Pradeep Kapur ji. And lastly, Shekhar Tiwari ji. Shekhar Tiwari ji is the reason why this is happening. He reached out to me and said it would be very nice if you could bring all of us together on your platform. Shekhar Tiwari ji is the president of the American Indo-Pacific Forum. And Shekhar ji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, your Shekhar ji, your video is freezing a little bit, but let me do this way, sir. First, I'd like to give each of our panelists 3 minutes to talk about the opening statement, which is, has the Biden-Modi meeting reset US-India ties, and if so, how? So I'll start in no particular order again. I'll start with Ramesh Kapur ji and then Pradeep Kapur ji, then Satish Jha and Shekhar Tiwari ji. Over to you, Ramesh Kapur ji.
Thank you. I think this has completely reset the relationship with the US and India. And I think this was a very successful trip of the president. And now we have to see the results, okay? The pageantry is over. Now, we have to see the boots on the ground, or as the American expression says, and that's the important part. Everything is in the detail. But I think India has taken a very important step in terms of agreeing that BRICS would not be the currency, okay? And that, I think, has come out from this meeting of this pageantry, and then also in France. So the West is really putting out the royal carpet to Modi and India. They've realized the importance that India is critical to United States and the Western security. And of course, the speech. I mean, some people felt the speech was long, but I don't think so. I think most of the congressmen and senators are not that familiar with India, which is what he had to come up and explain everything about India. All right. And I think this was knowledgeable for the congressman to understand. You'll be surprised. A lot of these folks are not as knowledgeable as you think they are. That's why their staffers become very important. My sense is there's a momentum now. Let's expand on it. Now India has to show, and also United States. I'll give you the points of both countries what they have to do. India now has to look at slowly decreasing the oil from Russia. Okay, that's important because that source won't be there too long. So they have moved their supply chain and away from 9% they were buying. They're buying 46% now. In the last month, they increased their usage by 15% more buying. So now is the time to get out of, and it's practical for India to do that. And the prime minister said that India is going to be the third largest economy, and that's in the direction. So India should now act like the world leader and can't be acting like short-term player and banyas and 10%, 20% difference in cost factor. India is beyond that. Looking at they've become a world leader with this prime minister. He has reflected that, and also you have to realize one other thing is that India and United States is the only country that will do anything for anybody. United States has done that during the Second World War, build up Germany, build up Japan, their enemies, and then we have built up China too at the present time, and we can build up India in manufacturing and the other areas. But more important also, the values are very similar. Look, when India did not have the resources to do it, with COVID, they still reached out to other countries and gave that COVID vaccine to other countries which they couldn't afford. All right, so that's the mindset of India is. Which is large years of culture. And then now let's come to the United States, what they have to do. They have to be serious. I think what Modi has to do is to move the US relationship at the prime minister's level, all right? And that's what, when the civil nuclear deal was done, that's how it was moved to the prime minister levels. It got it done. So I think that from the external affairs, I think that relationship will be moved in the PMO's level. And already in the United States, it is being, Biden is taking the initiative of that relationship at that level with Jake Sullivan. So those are the things that we have to do. Now, United States has to also, other than just promising and giving this pageantry, all these high words, has to do something concrete, change their laws. They have to change the law of Export Control Act, where make it easier in par with Japan, Australia, South Korea, New Zealand, and Israel, all right? And Australia, New Zealand, and Israel. So they have to change their law, and we have a problem still, and still they're not getting it. Because we just lost in the House. I thought we were going to pass in the House, but the Rules Committee on the Republican side did not vote for it, and also the Foreign Relations Chairman didn't vote for it, and they were Republican people. So there are a lot of work that has to be done on the American side. Okay, and we have to make sure that I think the president should take capital, political capital on this relationship. Instead of just depending on his staff, he should take it personally. And then, when 72% of the Democrats vote, when Modi is over here, send a letter out criticizing India, and Modi at the present time. To me, it tells me is that that the president is not taking this job seriously. Okay, that is this is his party. This is my party, Democrat, and they still at the maybe they might have criticized at other time. This was the wrong time to do it, and that reflects that. Also, going back to the lobbyist, okay, maybe
Rameshji, if you don't mind, Rameshji, if you don't mind,
these are some of my recommendations that I have, and I have a few later if you have some time.
Yes,
Because
yes,
at the
yes.
end of the day, okay, the pageantries are over. Okay, we've got to get things done now on ground.
Absolutely, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. I'm sorry, Rameshji. I just wanted to make sure that we get everybody included in the initial statement. You will have your time again, sir. I'm going to have some specific questions for you. Now let's move on to Ambassador Pradeep Kapur. Sir, you and I have been on many panels before, and this time, you're known for your absolute center. You don't even go this way, that way. So I'm looking forward to a good opening statement from you. Please limit it to 3 minutes, sir, because I want everybody in once, and then we can start having more questions. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sree Iyer, for putting this together and for all the great work that you do and your channel does. It's very important for the world. And uh, today's topic is, did Biden and Modi reset India? Reset definition primarily is that when there are challenges and want to resolve those and stabilize and strengthen the relationship. Yes, yes to that question. Did they reset India? Of course, they reset it. Why do I say that? With my experience of working in diplomacy in the field of diplomacy for many decades now, the India-US joint after the visit was something very unique, very outstanding. I am involved with drafting many such statements. The scope, the content, the length, the intent, the purpose, the directions, the clarity, the vision, everything is phenomenal. It's the longest ever statement which I have ever seen in any bilateral relationship in the world. It covers all the sectors. The defense cooperation, the space cooperation, cyber, terrorism, climate, technology. We'll of course get into some of those aspects. The other aspect, what I see, the negativity was in the sense by my friends in the US administration. Thousands and tens of thousands from a combination of the Khalistanis, the voters, the George Soros funded support, and unfortunately the supporters of in Congress. Taking the same message to the White House that this visit must be, calling names in very bad language, to use the same language I thought. The system in the US and the administration decided to trash those messages. The protests, no protests were allowed anywhere near the positive atmosphere.
Unfortunately, we seem to have lost Ambassador Pradeep Kapurji. I'm sure he'll be joining us momentarily. Shekhar Tiwari ji, I see that you are having some difficulties joining. Can you say something so I know your audio is fine?
Yes, now it's fixed. Now I think it's working.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Sir, just stay online while we have Satish Jha ji give his opening statement. Sir, 3 minutes. Why do you think the Modi-Biden visit has reset US-India relations, sir?
Thank you, Sree. My point is, has it reset? I think there has been a continuum of relationship building between the two nations. And I think the diaspora has been the main force behind it. And of course, from 2005 of Manmohan Singh and later on Modi's first visit to Modi's second visit, this is building up. But reset, I think, is a very strong word. I would say that things have been evolving. And at this point in time, they have taken a direction which is slightly getting broader. there is a greater reason for US to connect with India. There's a greater reason for India to connect with US. So there are reasons the two countries are coming closer. But reset, I think, is a much stronger word. I think some people have concerns about the fact that what President Obama said, how we reacted as a nation from India's side to a journalist speaking something. But all these are part of the whole landscape, and we should take them in totality. They do not diminish the efforts. We should take them as part of our evolution. We should take them our value building. And my point is that as we become stronger in democratic norms and values and grow up, we learn to take these things in a stride. And that is something which came out of the same process where we're talking about reset in the strategic and economic and defense relationships, etc. The fact is, some steps have been taken. I think when you look at in totality, they're very modest. If you look at them in the context of how things were, they seem very huge as such. So it depends on how you see them. So in the context of evolution, they seem great. In the context of quantum, they seem kind of modest. So I would say that a path is set where now India-US relationship is going to be along the similar path evolving, and it will go through a certain, sometimes it will be gain more momentum, sometimes it will be steady, sometimes kind of cool, but the path is clear that the two countries, for a variety of reasons, have been evolving along the lines of the path that two great and old democracies should come together. Those were the words yesterday. Now they are real things. And I would say that the economic might that size of 140 crore people gives it, we should always be mindful that India remains a $2,000 per capita income country. We should always be mindful that even if today Chandrayaan 3 was sent, it was sent after 60 years, and instead of 3 days, it will be in 43 days. There are challenges of learning, but that's okay. My point is, I don't take that as anything less than evolving as such. So in my sense, and I would say it's not a reset, it's an evolution on the positive lines. And I'm glad that the charismatic leadership of Prime Minister Modi is kind of creating new momentum. And that's where I think my 3 minutes look like over. Sree, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much for that crisp introduction, Satish Ji. And I hear you, sir, that this is an evolutionary process. There was no radical reset that happened. Ambassador Kapur Ji, I will come back to you in just one moment. I'd like to have Sree Tiwari Ji, Shekhar Tiwari Ji, give his opening statement, and then perhaps 1 minute you can summarize yours, Kapur Ji. First, let us listen to Shekhar Tiwari Ji. Shekhar Ji, namaskar, and the floor is yours, sir.
So I believe the relationship was almost reset. The last time the relationship got off the track was 1998 after the nuclear test. And it took almost 20 years to get to the relationship that was recently before the Ukraine war. It took a lot of effort by a lot of people. Some of them are in this panel. So the relationship got so bad, and I'll give you one measure. It used to take a week to get American visa. It started taking 3.5 years to take American visa. Now, recently I checked yesterday, it is taking 2 years to get American visa for fresh travelers. So you can say that relationship has been somewhat restored, but not completely restored. Now, the relationship went off the track, not because of any material reason, but because of the personal diplomacy. So personal diplomacy, there are two main actors in both countries, the head of the foreign policy and the prime minister and the president over there. So I think the top of the ticket was really not in close contact, and the one below that did not handle it right. I won't blame only the Indian side for that. I think the Secretary of State has a lot to do with it. There was no need to give an honor guard to a foreign minister in this country. He boosted the ego of a man who was already full of ego. So, it was a failure of personal diplomacy and some material aspect, which was the India's tie with Russia, and also the India buying the gasoline from Russia. So there were some material problem came in, but I believe the whole thing was, it could have been taken if there was a close personal diplomacy. It was a failure of personal diplomacy that caused the whole thing.
Thank you so much, Shekhar ji. And back to you, Ambassador Kapur ji. 1 minute to kind of finish up what you're saying. We were having difficulty hearing you, sir. Ambassador Pradeep Kapur ji, please, your turn. You are muted, sir. You are muted. You are muted.
Okay.
Yeah. Again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I hope you can hear me clearly now.
Yes.
Thank you very much once again. I think it was a phenomenal reset, because I've seen a lot of these relationships all over the world. And the way I see it is that it has moved one notch higher, many notches higher. Obama's statement, which was in very bad taste, was ignored completely by both the sides during the discussions. The press conference itself was very well curated. The question on human rights, both the leaders responded in details, and they said that democracy is in both the countries' DNAs. The respect and honor given to the delegation and to the Indian diaspora was absolutely phenomenal. I was there at the White House with a lot of the others who are there, and the way we were received was very, very different. It was one of the largest ever gatherings in the history of the White House. The body language was very positive. The amount of time the leaders spent together was very, very large. The messaging to China was very clear. The messaging to Pakistan was very clear. The messaging to the world was very clear. The messaging to the media was very clear. Future directions were given very clearly. There are certain suggestions both at the macro level and at the micro level, which I want to discuss in detail. Do you want me to discuss the broad picture now, or separately, Sree Iyer?
Now, this is an opening statement, Ambassador ji, and I'll have specific questions for each of you, gentlemen, based on what your opening statement is. So we're going to have now, I'm going to reverse the order and start with Shekhar Tiwari ji. Shekhar ji, I have a question for you, sir. Let us take a look at what happened. Just before this, in March, the Indian consulate in San Francisco, they attempted to set fire to it. Luckily, it had rained, so that didn't happen. But they, again, successfully, actually, I mean, not fully, but they at least, it was doused quickly. They did set fire to it on July 2nd and in the night. Now, this now is still, the culprits are still not caught. So there is definitely a go slow, in my opinion, because the day after that, I had suggested how technologically they could have found out who it was that set fire. 1:30 a.m. in the morning in a sleepy neighborhood, you're not going to have a lot of people going around. My question to you, Shekhar Tiwari ji, is Democratic Party, there are multiple factions from what I see, especially in Department of State. Do you think, in your opinion, and I won't hold you to it, do you think this investigation should be fast-tracked? Because to me, these are just miscreants trying to set fire to India's property. Do you think the Democratic Party is quickly going ahead and doing it? What is preventing the San Francisco Police Department or the FBI from apprehending the culprits? We know there are at least 3 people. Just specific questions, sir.
By the way, you have mixed things. What happened in San Francisco, London, that has little to do with the relationship. In fact, it is because of the relationship, things are going fast track. What you don't see, it doesn't mean it's not happening. In one month time, there had been 3 terrorists in India list has been eliminated. One in Lahore, Pakistan, other one in United Kingdom, and third one in Canada. That's the progress. And going into the country itself and eliminating people who were terrorizing India is a big achievement. That means
Shekharji, we don't know who did that. Shekharji, we don't know who did that. So leave it like that.
The government knows, okay? All the 3 government knows who it is. Otherwise, those people would not have been apprehended in their own place. So 3 people died in 1 month, and some of them are at large. So people who did in San Francisco, they were hooligans, but their leaders are very different. So United States is doing everything, Canadian government is doing, and UK government. And you can't blame the UK Prime Minister is of Hindu origin. All these three countries are cooperating to catch those people, but those people are basically not the leaders. If they would have been leaders, they wouldn't have been surviving today. And it's going on. A big operation is going on in 3-4 countries to eliminate those people who are trying to threaten the Indian diplomats, who are trying to burn the properties of the Indian government. So just keep watching. What you don't see doesn't mean it's not happening. It's happening.
Thank you so much, Shekhar ji. I'm sorry to have put you on the spot. I just felt that sometimes we have to take some of these hard issues. Now let us take a quick look at Satish Jha ji. Satish ji, very crisp opening statement. You thought that this was an incremental progress. My 2 cents to you, sir, is there is this pomp and ceremony going on in Washington, D.C. And as if by magic, the same day, 22nd of June, the ex-president Barack Obama, I'm taking not just at what he said about India, but he also took some pot shots at his successor or his vice president, the current president, Biden. Don't you think it was a little unusual for the timing of that interview? What was it intended to do?
I think if you look at it from larger perspective, if you see diplomatically, I think Pradeep is right about that. If you see strategically, I think Shekhar is right about that. But it's a larger context. The fact is, for the 9 years, India's population has been talking about the same issues, which Barack Obama very eloquently, and I think I was very impressed by the language as such. And I'm not on this side or the other side, I'm right in the middle as an observer. My observation is, if you see the challenges that the nation of India has been going through, the minorities are going through, the press is facing it, free expression has its challenge here. Speaking something which is critical of government criticism has become anti-national as such. The press people have been put under laws which are basically designed for terrorists. All these questions of 9 years, they've been actually boiling up. They've been simmering. And it needed a voice. And it's just as well a leader of the stature of Barack Obama said it. It's not, and it was the right moment because it needed maximum impact. Of course, when you do that, state is going to pounce on that, and they did, which is also perfectly fine. But the fact is, it raised the question that you can't get away with it. It raised the question at a global level. It's only about questioning. Just think of it this way. He's only talking words. This is happening to people. And raise that is important, and you need a great leader to pick it up. So my point is, we may like to behave because of politeness, because of courtesy, because of very, very good reasons of diplomacy in a nice way. But these very important questions of citizens, of values, of democracy, they have to be handled. In fact, he is not the only one. Chief Justice of India said the same thing. The Chief Editor of Indian Express said the same thing. Now people are beginning to say those things despite whatever be the charisma of our great leader. Look, there's no question about the charismatic nature of Narendra Modi. Having said that, there is no question also about the fact that which have happened in the past 9 years. They are very different from the India of the previous 65 years as such. And the value system that India cherished through constitution and the freedom of struggle, that's been put in some ways on a kind of a very hot place, so to say. So I think someone had to speak, and I'm surprised Obama did that. Somebody had to do that. And somebody had to do that to make an impact. It got talked about, but it hasn't made any impact as such in terms of real, steps to be taken to look at the freedom of expression being sacrosanct. That press is the fourth state as such, is the pillar of democracy. If you are going to undermine judiciary, and somebody has talked about it, and I'm glad someone did. So my point is, I'm with Pradeep ji on one hand, I'm with Shekhar ji on the other hand, but these questions can't be just brushed under the carpet. That's where my position will be as an editor, as someone who is looking at higher values that democracy must have. And I'm very conscious of the fact that 93% people in India do not have high school education, and we are looking at $2,000 per capita income economy. So hype is good, but reality must not be forgotten. Otherwise, you will not be paying attention to that.
Thank you so much, Satish ji. Thank you so much, Satish ji, and Ambassador Kapur ji. Eric Garcetti, the new ambassador to India, He is two-term mayor. He actually termed out of mayorship in Los Angeles. He is progressive, very, very strong progressive. And he goes to India. One of the first things he does is to go and meet with a Bollywood actor. And then he goes to Manipur, looks at that, and then he comes to Kolkata consulate and he gives a press conference. Ambassador Kapur, in your tenure as an ambassador, see, Shekharji, I'm just trying to highlight points of dissonance here, and I completely listen to what you can tell us. But my point is to show some of these dissonance. We are trying to take this relationship forward. As an ambassador, have you ever done, for example, meet with a Richard Gere, who's a supporter of Dalai Lama, or somebody else of that nature? Has anything like that happened when an Indian ambassador goes to a foreign country and does these things?
Thank you, Sree Iyer, for raising these points. Things which are not acceptable in diplomacy have to be condemned in the strongest terms. So, similarly, if he has done certain things, he has to be told that these are out of bounds for ambassadors and diplomats. On the other hand, what do I see in Ambassador 𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙦? That he is a first-time ambassador. He is not very well aware of the rules of diplomacy. I have seen lots of political appointees who have worked as ambassadors, and they do have certain fault lines. But on the whole, when I evaluate 𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙦, I feel that he will turn out to be a good ambassador in the long term. And he is trying hard. He has to fight against the bureaucracy of the State Department. He has to fight against the deep state. And he is doing many good things which are not getting due recognition also. Now, he understands that India is already the 5th largest economy of the world. It has the largest population of the world. It has young demographics, which is going to be the future workforce for the world. It has so many positives to it. It has the biggest rural population. It has the biggest market coming up in the future. So he understands a lot of these points. He is also facing a lot of difficulties in dealing with the State Department, as my friends in the US administration tell me. So how he has to counter those is what I'd like to give a little bit of advice to him on this channel. I have worked as ambassador, getting not getting a reply.
Unfortunately, we seem to have lost him momentarily. He was doing fine until it just broke down. We will rejoin in a moment. Now let us get to Ramesh Kapurji. Rameshji, you said one of the things that India will need to do is to wean itself off of Russian oil. Now, I know for a fact that India has a stake in Sakhalin Island, where it sees some of the wells there as something that India can use. Now, Exxon, after the onset of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, they gave up their 30% stake. And I believe that has been picked up equally between India and Japan. So I think now we are looking at 35, 35 and 30, 30 being Russia, 35 and 35 being India and Japan. So as much as we would like to think that India might want to, keep its options open, here is a situation where it might not be able to do so easily. Your thoughts on how India is going to be able to do this delicate balanced walk?
Oh, well, it's what I hear on the ground. Remember, okay? Every congressman that I've met every one of them when I was pushing for get India to be part of with Japan, the 5 countries to get the latest technology. So India will have to make a decision. All right, okay. Perfection is the enemy of good. All right. They have to look at the bigger pictures. I know the press always wants to micromanage, and let me say something. Okay, I've been doing U.S.-India relations since 1986. During the Ukraine war, that is the worst relationship I have ever seen in U.S.-India relationship. All right, since 1986. All right, and I've gone through Pokhran 2 and other things. Okay, it was worse. All right, and a lot of times because I've supported the folks and they're candid with us. We ask candid questions, they're candid with us, and this is one of the things that they are bringing it up. Now, I don't have that suggestion how India can do it. I'm not the expertise in that area. I'm expertise in the national security and U.S.-India relationship. I'm telling you what the reality of the politicians over here is. All right. And I think the 72 folks. My sense is if they would have accepted, they are accepting India in terms of defense, weaning it out or whatever it is. But again, in terms of this, they were buying 9%, and all of a sudden, why did India make those decisions of increasing it? Okay, so they were not obviously sensitive to United States interests, and this is where I come to they should fire both of the lobbyists that are there. What are the goddamn lobbyists doing? They should have let the Ministry of External Affairs know the reality that is on the ground. I was telling the reality on the ground. Shekhar was telling him the reality on the ground. And guess what? Instead of being honest about it, we were looked as anti-India. Come on, or anti-BJP or whatever it is. Okay, So that's what the problem is. That's why I would say the PM has to get directly deal with United States. It is still, with all this PR and everything, we couldn't get the passed in the House on the Republican side. Now there's still the option on the Senate side. We are working on it. U.S. India Security Council working on the Senate side. But the reality is this is what the reality is. So India will have to decide how they can do it. I'm not going to tell them how they're going to do it, but it's a problem. It's a major problem. I mean, they were easily able to increase it from 9% to 45% or whatever it is. And so that's what decision. Maybe they have to make the decision, take the loss of those wells, move on the bigger picture. All right. Is India going to gain more with the United States national security? Will India get the latest technology in the defense area? Will United States, if China attacks more further in, can India counter United States? So those are the major decisions that India will have to make in terms of national security instead of the economic. And then also, are you going to get that support in terms of manufacturing in other areas that United States has built up or that they have? So that's what India has to. So we have to look at the bigger picture, and you have to say is that perfection is always the enemy of good, and that's where India has to decision. And it's in the crossroad. This president, I know this president for a long time. Okay, will do anything for India. Barack Obama was slow. We were trying to do a lot of things. He's very cautious. Forget it. Okay, but I know Biden for a long time. And let me give you a tip about that. When Pokhran 1 was exploded during Jimmy Carter's time, it was his vote that saved the sanctions to India during Indira Gandhi's time. This is when he was a senator at that time, the Foreign Relations Committee. And I've talked to him over the years. Okay, this guy is if India wants defense treaty, he's willing to give the defense treaty. But I don't believe India should take defense treaty. Maybe security alliance with United States, because tendency is to get fat and lazy, depend on somebody else. India will have to fight its own battles. So this is what the president is willing to do. So what are we worried about? A few wells over there, okay? And that's what my point is.
Thank you so much, Ramesh ji. I know the crux of it is President Biden means well towards India, and there are some discordant voices. Let us leave it at that. Shekhar ji, you had sort of told me that, look, don't take one single incident and then, that shouldn't form the basis of our discussion. I completely hear you, sir. The reason I said I even brought that up was because I don't know about you, but I sense that there are more than one departments of state inside the Department of State. And do you see it the same way? Because sometimes the Department of State will do something specifically to try and put India on the spot, whereas India doesn't do any of that sort. In fact, I would encourage India to hit back push back on some of these things. Nobody has any business talking about what is happening in Manipur. Yet the European Parliament has just passed an urgent resolution, and it's an internal matter. India doesn't talk about Black Lives Matters in United States. For the relationship between India and US, your question to you, sir, is: do you think that the Department of State has one voice, or is it in multiple voices?
Well, this is not the first time. During Donald Trump's time, half of the State Department is against Donald Trump. So always there is a state within the state, but that's not really a big issue. Let me give you an example. Nobody has touched into that. There are 5 Indian American congressmen and 1 vice president. Trust me, all of them are made enemies. All of them. Ro Khanna, Jayapal, all of them had been turned enemies by the Indian diplomacy. Now, Narendra Modi stood at the house and claimed them. He owned them. He said the 5 of those who are sitting in front of me, they are mine. The one standing behind me is mine. That was the greatest moment for Mother India to claim, Prime Minister of India claimed that Mother India had children here. Now, that was the moment the history should record. Now, it was the greatness of Narendra Modi, not as a person, but also as a prime minister, to really extend the hand of love, like a mother extends the love to the children. And that was restored the relationship to almost 10. So India lacks a good diplomat, a good diplomatic foreign policy. I wish a gentleman who is speaking as ambassador here, should have been with the foreign minister of India. You need a diplomat to be diplomat. When you ask him a question about Eric Garcetti, just watch his reply, what he said. He didn't condemn him. He basically said he's learning to be a diplomat. But there are some people who spent all their life as a diplomat, and they were responsible for screwing the US-India relationship. Had it not been Narendra Modi, he behaved like a Vajpayee on that podium. And he is himself was a similar rank, but essentially he behaved like a statesman, not like a politician. So Indian Americans are the greatest strength Mother India has, whether they are in Wall Street, whether they are in Silicon Valley, and whether they are in Hall of the Congress. So Narendra Modi basically said, these are my jewels, and Mother India is proud of it.
Thank you so much, sir. Now the next question is to Ambassador Pradeep Kapur. Pradeep ji, unfortunately, every time you start speaking, something happens to your connection, and somebody doesn't like you speaking, looks like. Although you have been very perfectly down the center. You have very gracefully defended a fellow colleague, a fellow ambassador, and I did put a very loaded question at you. Ambassador Kapur, my question to you, sir, is that we have so many things that are now, Indo-US. One of them is Quad, QUAD. Now, Quad has some objectives, and I'm hearing now that the security, that is the Indo-Pacific region security, is still kind of up in the air. That India still hasn't completely signed on, or US and India still aren't really decided on what the security interests are. Because if trade were to go forward, you have to have good security also. So your thoughts on how the Quad is progressing, especially vis-a-vis India and the United States?
Thank you for asking that question, Sree Iyer. And let me make a full confession. The first paper on the Quad was written by me when I was the ambassador of India in Cambodia. And I discussed this issue with the other ambassadors of US, Japan, Australia, and also UK. But the UK system and the UK ambassador could not understand probably the relevance or significance of it at that time. And the Japanese ambassador, the US ambassador, and the Australian ambassador, they flashed it to their headquarters. On the basis of that paper, the Japanese prime minister wrote to the others, and the Quad was started. Now, the concept which I had of the Quad was that to tackle the threat which China is posing to the world is not going to be easy for any of the countries, whether it is USA or the Western world or the other countries or India. Whereas if these countries get together and then decide on how to challenge this very significant threat of the present and of the future, then it would be a possibility. So Quad has taken baby steps. It started at the time when I was ambassador in Cambodia in 2004, 2005, and then it was dormant for a very long time because there were a lot of forces within the different state departments, within the Ministry of External Affairs, unfortunately, who were more closely aligned to China, and they sort of made sure that it would not make any progress till a time came around 2016 and 17 when it was rejuvenated, mostly for disaster management and then for COVID and then for other work together. Even the Malabar exercises are being done, but not under the umbrella of Quad. They have to be shifted immediately to the umbrella of Quad. And the original purpose for which it was defined, the definition was quadrilateral security dialogue. That has to be reinitiated in full vigor and full force. And about the other things, I just want to continue where I left off. The US India relationship has the promise of becoming the defining partnership of the 21st century. The US India joint statement has laid the basis for that. Now, how do we fill in all the details required to make sure it happens? First of all, the bureaucracies in the State Department and in the US administration have to be brought online. For Ambassador Eric Garcetti, I was saying one of the tricks he has to learn in a bureaucracy, which I learned very early in my career, was when I do not receive a reply from the Ministry of External Affairs, I do not accept it as a rejection. I used to write to other people above that officer or below that officer or in other ministries and departments, and then I would elevate it to the Prime Minister's office. And fortunately, those proposals and whatever was being said was understood and agreed upon and implemented. So he has to understand that, because one of the reasons that one of the problems that he's facing, which I learned from the friends in the US administration, is that the State Department is not listening to him. So he has to understand that if he is not getting a reply, he has to understand how to tackle that challenge and not be subdued by that challenge. That is the first thing. Second thing is there are lots of big areas where we have to cooperate. One of the big area which we have to cooperate very significantly, immediately, which will impact all our relationship in all the areas, is creating a US-India security dialogue or a security partnership or a security alliance. That is number one. The number two is to create a global coalition by both the countries, maybe of Muslim women, for example, for freedom, democracy, and peaceful coexistence, funded by lots of countries, starting with US and India. At the micro level, then I'll get on very, very quickly. The people who are working on the India desk in the State Department, for example, need to be changed to people who have belief in that sort of thing, who are loyal to that purpose, who have faith in the future of India and US relationship. And they have to have commitment and purpose. And secondly, they have to be they have to be given timelines. There has to be monitoring, both like internal timelines, internal accounting, internal checklists, and external auditing, whether those timelines are being followed or not. Because the bureaucrats, we think, even the diplomats, of ourselves as being more permanent than the politicians. We know we can outlast the politicians. But for the politicians and the people who are, working on these ideas, they have to have checklists so that the bureaucrats do not their names, and those who are wedded to the cause are able to implement it. That is another thing. The other thing which is I have read a paper here that there is a shortage of 30,000 healthcare providers, which is urgently needed for behavioral healthcare requirements of USA. Now, there is no possibility for the USA to fill this gap in the next so many years. And who can fill this gap? Of course, India can fill this gap. India is the largest provider of skilled people to the world. It has the largest population, but also the largest skilled population. Now, if these sort of dialogues also happen simultaneously with all the other things in the joint statement, there are so many specific instructions given to the two bureaucracies. Now, if those are not implemented, how do we make sure they are implemented? So that is where we need, monitoring, evaluation, assessment, and continuous follow-up. Like in Delhi, already the government has implemented the system on a sort of a board which is on the computers of all the senior officers, including the cabinet secretary, where they keep on monitoring important issues, important files regularly. Same thing has to be done with India-US relations on the US side first and on the India side, because the US bureaucrats are throwing their hands up and telling everybody, "Oh, we do not get much cooperation in Indian bureaucracy." But that is also something which they have to look up inwards on their own side. Then the FDA fees, for example, are very, very high, and those are unaffordable by the India pharma industry. My own friend, who made some of the most revolutionary masks during the COVID time, told me that if he has to clear the FDA hurdles and get the licensing and approvals, it is going to cost him a huge bomb. And if he has to do the same thing in 10 other countries, it's going to make him bankrupt. Now, how do we resolve those issues on the ground where both the countries have to understand? Because already a beginning has been made where each country is listening to the other country, listening to the concerns of the other country. And as I've been saying earlier, that there are some cultural differences, but we have the Indian diaspora here to help bridge those cultural differences, to help manage those gaps. The American diaspora in India is also becoming more and more bigger and bigger and more important. So these are two great resources we already have. I'm going to stop here. There are other points which I can take on later, but thank you, Sree Iyer ji.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Kapur. My next question is to Ramesh Kapur, one Kapur to another. Ramesh, the question I have is, one of the things I was expecting from the Modi-Biden meet was some sort of a clarity on having some to address these immediate challenges, like 30,000 people in the health sector industry, that there could be a fast-tracked version of H1 which would help US plug the needs immediately, even if it's like a visa where you have to go back to your country of origin after the said contract ends. Do you see any movement in this direction? Because I was thinking that that would come, but it did not come. Any work in that direction?
Well, they've already passed. State Department says that they will give them 6 more months for extend the visitor's
Oh, no,
visa.
no, no, no. Ramesh Kapurji, I'm not talking about people who are out of jobs. I'm talking about being able to have a more faster version of H1 to take care of specific needs. Like Ambassador Kapur was saying, that there's a need for 30,000 healthcare professionals. This could be, nursing sector, palliative care or something like that.
These are
For that,
behavioral healthcare providers is the exact terminology.
behavioral healthcare providers. So Ramesh Kapurji, what I was hoping was that in that meet, there would be some sort of a faster version of H1, if you will, but it has some bounds around it. Today, H1 can be converted into a green card, provided there is some sufficient ground. But what I'm talking about is like what Indian professionals do when they go to Middle East. They go for 3-year contract, and then the contract gets renewed or not, then they have to come back to India. Was there anything like this in the anvil, on the anvil? Was it there discussed? Because I heard that it was going to be done. Nothing happened. I'm curious.
Well, it's the reality is, remember, okay, no politician is going to publicly say that it's okay for jobs to be outsourced. And you might give the rationality, we need the thing, this, that. But the bigger picture is, all right, and that's the reality. Because I remember during the civil nuclear deal, Ronan Sen was criticizing the Indian American community not helping him with the H1B visa, and I told him in front of all the CGs candidly, and but he was big enough not to take it personally because he saw the bigger goal, the civil nuclear deal, and I delivered the 86% Democrats to vote for the civil nuclear deal, and he was big enough to accept that. And I told him candidly, I said, look, okay, if you want any politician to say it's okay for jobs to be outsourced, they'll be outsourced just like Vajpayee got outsourced. And he had lost the election at that time. So this is the reality. You have to realize that, okay, on the political side, on the democracy side. Now, how can you make that easier? Is that you address it on the national security side, okay? You address it by having that relationship with United States in the lip service, change the laws. See, once this law, export control law, is changed, people start looking at India not as their jobs are going to be lost. They're looking at India for their national security. Okay, so if our boys have to be there in China to defend Taiwan, can we count on India at that time? All right. And that's what we were successful doing the civil nuclear deal, because all the veterans came out and voted for the civil nuclear deal, because the problem we had was NPT, nuclear non-proliferation, was our base, democratic base, and still 86% voted for the civil nuclear deal for India, made an exception for India. And that's because of the veterans coming out and saying that India is critical to United States national security. So once you do at the top level on the security side, everything else at the lower level will come together, right? So my suggestion is we got to look at the bigger picture. Okay, with anything, look at the bigger picture, and then everything else will come together, and eventually, hopefully, and we want to get an average man to think highly about India, and that's the critical part. India took a hit during the Ukraine side, but that's the past. This is what my suggestion is: go for the bigger picture, and everything else will come in line. Some of the ideas that you're talking about, the relationship about, so the average man won't look at India as that their jobs are being taken away. They're looking at India, so their boys, that the 350 million Americans are going to be safer because of the security relationship, and of course India, 1.4 billion Indians will be safe also. So that's what my suggestion is to, and then that the other details will fall in line.
Thank you so much, Ramesh ji. And now, Satish ji, Ramesh ji mentioned something that leads me directly to the next question to you, sir. The United States Navy is extremely happy with the way their carriers, that is aircraft carriers or whatever the ships they had, that got serviced by India in two coasts, east as well as west coast. I'm told that L&T was a company that did that. They're extremely happy with that. So that means that the United States ships that are probably stationed in the Asia Pacific region don't have to come halfway across the world to get their ships serviced. So this is a value added industry. And as a venture capitalist, I want you to put that VC cap on. Would this also be looked at as a thing that is going to take jobs away from the United States, or would it be looked at more as a thing that is going to make US more nimble, more dynamic, more agile? What are your thoughts, sir?
I think US has been very pragmatic about it. And if you see, as technology has progressed, US is a country with least unemployment. And like Professor Ambassador Kapur said, I have a different view on the behavioral, you can say, physicians as such, because that's a very, you can say, it requires softer skills, which only people groomed in the culture can have. But about anything which is technological at the level of servicing, India is being seen by the US and the companies that use that as a very good partner, because now we have a 30 years history of very stable way of supporting them. As you see, India's biggest export today is about almost 7% of, you can say, the global service exports. They come from India. So because clearly we have a huge population, clearly we have had some success with higher education, clearly we have had some success with training, etc., which helps. I think US will balance it out in such a way. There'll be some local noises, but they have always balanced out in the interest of the nation that is USA. So I think in general, movement is towards using Indian resources for reasons of cost, as well as the history of having delivered consistently reasonably well. So I think that's a very, very good thing that will keep happening. And India is seeking in some way that we should use more Indian resources to support the US needs as such. As you know, US has the lowest unemployment today. Having said that, India also has to think in terms of how to upgrade its majority of the people. Right now, we are operating with only 10 crore people, which basically about 7-8% of India. That's operating it. If you get a sense, 10% of India GDP almost comes from 5 million people who support technology. So I think from US point of view, it makes tremendous sense that they should leverage whatever India's strengths are. From India's point of view, it makes tremendous sense to look for areas where it can support US, where US is looking for, because there is a shortage of skilled people where America needs them. I think that's where the ties are. When I look at Indo-US ties, I think the greatest tie is in economic affairs. That's what has happened. And strategic, Ramesh, of course, is a strategic person. Shekhar Ji is a strategic person. They look at from that side. But India is not as ready because it's still divided, it's still evolving, it's still asking many questions. So I would say the greater relationship India has is at the level of economic ties and the services sector, which has cemented over the past 30 years where US India have been coming together. I hope, and thank you, Sree, very much for asking this question. And from investors' point of view, of course, we are all looking at Indians are willing to invest in these areas because they understand that game, right? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Now let us wind down this debate. I'd like to request each of the panelists to give one suggestion from each side, what US urgently needs to do to make this thing go even better, and the same thing from India side. And I'll start with Shekhar Tiwari ji. Shekhar ji, one suggestion for the United States government and one for India. What needs to be done urgently so that this can go even better?
Change the foreign policy team, both sides.
And why is that, sir? I mean, you have given some examples.
So what kind, if the team destroys the relationship that was built over the 20 years in several months, that's not a good team. You know, generally, when you lose the war, don't shoot the troops, shoot the generals.
Thank you so much. Very, very precise. Now let's take the same question to Ambassador Pradeep Kapur ji. One urgent thing that India needs to do, one urgent thing that US needs to do. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. So what I see today on the landscape is, there's a lot of positive forces working towards making this relationship great and taking it to the next dimension. On the other hand, there's a coalescing of the breaking US forces and the breaking India forces. So both these countries, while they've already taken the initial baby steps in terms of naming out Pakistan and terrorism and stuff like that in the joint statement, they have to jointly sit down and work together. Because even the media we see these days is very, very biased. So for people to state that, media has to be heard, but media can be heard if it is neutral and what was expected of the media as an independent resource, but not when it is totally biased and obviously biased. So in my opinion, the major challenge for both these countries is to seriously get together and work in a democratic manner for democracy and for challenging the breaking US forces and the breaking India forces, and then taking our relationship many notches higher. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Pradeep Kapur. And now let us go to Satish Jha ji. One thing that India needs to do urgently, one thing that US needs to do urgently, sir.
I think US should at this time establish 100,000 American scholarships annual. They come to India, and India should have 100,000 scholarships from India to people who are looking at understanding US policy making process, how US democracy works, and that kind of dialogue that will happen, that will create a momentum in the longer term. Right now, there is a gap because India thinks from the point of view of we can do it as a state, while US understands how difficult it is to get anything passed. That appreciation will take us in a right direction for a period of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Satish ji. Lastly, Ramesh Kapur ji, your thoughts. One urgent thing India needs to do, one urgent thing US needs to do.
Well, let me say what Biden, U.S. should be doing is, I think Biden should be with Jake Sullivan, use up some of his political capital for India in changing the export control law. All right, he's got to use that. Basically, just the Indian Americans are pushing it, and I don't think there's enough capital used by the political capital by the administration, like Bush did during the civil nuclear deal. That's one from the American side. On the Indian side, I think if Modi takes the suggestion of changing the team that he's talking about, my suggestion is to what now that he has recognized the 5 Samosa caucus Indian Americans, every time he visits, he should meet them private, as a separate meeting instead of meeting the rest of the groups that he is meeting. That's one. And the second thing is there are probably about 25 more Indian Americans around the country, okay, can do the job of if tomorrow they eliminates the Ministry of External Affairs tomorrow, I think these 25 Indian Americans will do a better job than the Ministry of External Affairs can do. All right. So that's my suggestion for India is for Modi, when he does visit every time, make sure he sets aside some time for the Samosa
Ramesh, you're missing the vice president.
No, he meets the vice president. He always meets the vice president. With the president, he meets the vice president anyway. So I'm talking about separately meeting in that, and then maybe it's time for the vice president to take a trip to India. All right, and I'll try to push her to take a trip to India.
Find her roots.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. We have a few questions from our viewers. And at this point of time, these are directed at specific participants. So I'm just going to have those things put up here. Just 1 second, please. Thank you so much, Divakar Agarwal, for becoming a YouTube member of our channel. And this question is to Satish Jha ji, who has momentarily stepped away from his desk. Let's come back to that in a little bit. Let's ask this question of Ambassador Kapur ji. How can we trust Democrats? They say and do something else. Cannot be trusted.
Thank you.
Is that to me or
in the sense that that is
Ambassador
a process.
Kapur. It's for Ambassador Kapur.
Ambassador.
Ambassador. Yeah.
That is a process of evolution. Once they see the importance of India increasing economically, the problems the Western world is facing economically are very serious already, and they are increasing day by day. And then they realize that their recourse to the challenges that the Western world is facing, one of the most important resources is going to be they will automatically have to realign themselves and synergize with India. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you, Rahul Sharma, for becoming, for donating. And the last question was for Satish Jha ji. He is not there and is personally, it is directed at something that he made in his statement. So I can't ask the other panelists to answer that question. So we will leave it at that. I don't know what happened to Satish Jha ji. One of the important things that I see, and I cover India news day in and day out, US too, and I'm one of the most prolific video content creators today in the United States, which is looking at both India and US. My 2 cents is that one important thing that Ramesh Kapur ji said, that you can't just like that say that there is a deal signed wherein workforce can be brought into United States. I get that. However, I also look at how many of these companies are having trillion-dollar evaluations and multi-hundred-billion-dollar evaluations. If you take a little bit peek under the hood, you look at all the FANG, for example, the companies, 52 to 53% of their workforce is consultants who can be fired like that. They don't want to increase their overhead, and they also want to show per employee revenue as in the millions. See, this is wrong. So I think the American politicians are smart enough to understand that there is some sort of a balance that needs to be achieved when trade goes from US to India. For example, I'm hearing that the General Electric Aviation, they're going to have airplane engines are going to be built in India with some restrictions and so on. these kinds of things also will take jobs away. On the other hand, US has India has just placed a 280 Boeing aircraft buying purchase order, and that is going to create 1 million jobs. This was President Biden's words. So there is give, there is take. It's both sides. Let's hope that everybody understands it. And I'm hoping that we'll come back again for a discussion just like this one. And I thank all the panelists. Satish Jha ji, I don't know what happened. His call dropped. Satish Jha ji, Ramesh Kapur ji, Ambassador Pradeep Kapur ji, and lastly, the host, Satish Tiwari ji. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to host this program. And I'm hoping that with viewers, with your comments, we will see if we want to come back and revisit this in a few weeks' time, because elections are coming in both India as well as in the United States, and a lot of things are going to be happening. A lot of water is going to flow down the Yamuna, as well as the, what river is that, sir, in Washington, D.C.? Foggy Bottom. Potomac.
Potomac.
Yeah. So thank you once again. Namaskar.